Welcome into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. Now, there is still a minute and 20 seconds left in this football game. I'm joined by Rocky Magana, as I am each and every week. I'm Steven Serda, by the way. But I think it's safe to say the Kansas City Chiefs are leaving Santa Clara with a win this week, Rocky. San Francisco's got their backups in. The Chiefs have their backups in late in the fourth quarter. Juan Thornhill just intercepted their backup quarterback. They're up 44-23 right now with a minute left. And we just really couldn't wait to get on here and get going for you guys this evening because, man, that was a hell of a performance against the number one defense in the NFL, Rocky. I think this was the best Chiefs performance of the season, hands down, all the way around. Aside from a couple of blunders there on special teams and being down 10-0 early in this ball game. But as of right now, as they take a knee to run the clock out, the Chiefs are going to leave San Francisco with a 44-23 victory over the 49ers. Going to head into their bye week at 5-2 with what is easily, in my opinion, the most impressive performance of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the slow starts have got to stop. But that's besides the point. We're not here to naysay today. Patrick Mahomes gives you the largest margin of error of any player in the NFL. And this was probably one of the most entertaining games we've watched all year as a Chiefs fan on both sides of the ball, really. You know, the defense made plays, offense stepped up from beginning to end. And this 49ers team, they're not a bad team. They're better than their record. They have a lot of answers that they're looking for, and they have more questions than answers at this point, I think. But as a Chiefs fan, you just have to be super, super, super energized after watching this game, especially seeing how the rest of the AFC West did today, with the exception of the lowly Raiders squeaking one out against the even lowlier, Houston Texans. The Chiefs got their game lead back in the division heading into the bye week, and as you prep for the second half of the season, you got to feel really good about this next stretch of games. And you think the Chiefs are probably going to be finishing strong and wrapping up the AFC West and pushing for that 1 seed.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even express right now, like how impressive this win was going against this defense. And we were talking about it a little bit before we got going here. And this defense is fantastic. And I understand Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback that they have played so far this season, and it's not close. But I don't even think this performance is necessarily an indictment on the defense or the competition that they've played. Like, sometimes you get these games from superstar players where there's just nothing you can do about it. And everything was working today for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's a credit to Andy Reid and the offensive coaching staff and the playmakers that they have on the offensive side of the ball, because everybody was just on today. And, Nick Bosa, I don't think he's 100% healthy. I don't think Charvarius Ward's 100% healthy. They didn't have Eric Armstead, who's an absolute stud along the interior of that defensive line for the 49ers defense. But this team has been really, really competitive this season. They've been dominant on the defensive side of the ball, no matter what personnel they put out on the field, because I think D'Amico Ryans is one of the best defensive play callers in football. And man, the Chiefs were just prepared. I think this is a statement game for them, which is weird. You think about like NFC opponent just ahead of a bye week. And we heard from Patrick Mahomes earlier this week, and he was asked about, trying to make sure that the team is up and prepared for this game ahead of a bye. And Mahomes was just like, well, they better be ready. We're coming off of a loss. What are you talking about? They better not need any more determination than that. And man, the Chiefs just showed up today in a big way against a really tough team. And I don't think this is an indictment on the San Francisco 49ers and their outlook on the rest of the season. But now they're 3-4. The Chiefs are 5-2. And they're coming off their most impressive win of the season, hands down, all around, across the board. They were just absolutely dominant today.
Yeah, I mean, they were dominant. And going back to what Patrick Mahomes said about the team better be ready. Yeah, you better be ready. You just lost the title of the best team in the NFL because it wasn't debatable anymore after that. You lost a head-to-head game against a team that was debated as as the other best team in the NFL. So if that doesn't get you going and get you ready to, start working your way back up for your next title shot, then nothing will, and you shouldn't be in this game. And the fact that the Chiefs came out and perform the way they did, especially after falling down to 10 points again early in the game, just shows you, that the fight that this team does have in them, that they don't give up. They're never out. But the slow starts are another story. I mean, you can't keep spotting in a good NFL teams 10 points week in, week out. Um, 3/4 of this game was lights out football by this team. The first quarter was hard to watch. And we can't overlook how hard to watch this first quarter was on offense and defense both. Um, Huafanga is one of the best young defensive backs in the NFL for San Francisco, and that was a heck of a break he made on that ball. But Patrick Mahomes had no business throwing that pass, and Sky Moore has got to know that he has to get in front of the defensive back on that first drive. There's no way that you can give up points like that deep in. Especially when they're gashing you the way they were on the run game.
So let's really get into it. I had to just sit here and bask in that performance for a few minutes to start the show tonight, because man, it was a fun football game, and they were absolutely dominant in the second half, which, like, we've seen this offense this season kind of struggle coming into the second half. We talk about the Andy Reid opening script and how great that is for the Chiefs, and then they kind of flounder a little bit. And then starting the second half, the Chiefs usually have the ball because they like to defer. They like to have the ball to start the second half. And they've been kind of sluggish coming out of those locker room breaks. And it was the polar opposite today. They were absolutely dominant the entire second half of the football game. The 49ers just absolutely didn't stand a chance. And Rocky, I think it starts with the protection along the offensive line. I already talked about the Niners defensive line a little bit. And when this defensive line is healthy, I do think there's a case to be made. They are the best defensive line in football. I think it's San Francisco, it's Buffalo, and there's a lot of other teams that are in the mix there. But arguably, in back-to-back weeks, you played the two best defensive lines in football. And this Chiefs offensive line was fantastic today. I know Bosa wound up getting a sack later in the game, and he's the kind of player that, they're just going to make those plays here and there eventually. Like, they're going to walk into a sack or something because they're so good. But the offensive line as a whole was fantastic today, and it's the best performance they've had since their performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few weeks ago. And, we've seen the ups and downs of the offensive line this season. And man, whatever they did this week to get up for this game and to get prepared for this contest, can we see that every week from now on? Can we see that every week from this offensive line? Because when they do things like this against that defensive line, against this defensive play caller and D'Amico Ryans, I'm going to get frustrated if they come back after the bye and have another bad performance where they're letting all kinds of pressure get to Patrick Mahomes, because this is what we expected them to be. The performance that they had today against the San Francisco 49ers is what we expected this offensive line to be coming into this football game. And when you protect Patrick Mahomes and you give him time, he is going to find the open guy down the field. And this offense is going to be really, really tough to beat, man.
I think that there was a definite shift in the mindset of the offensive line this game, different than what we've seen in weeks past. And I think the change that was made, if you watch this game, was they decided, if we get beat, we're just going to hold them. We're not going to let them get to Patrick. We're not going to whiff and try to chase after the guy. We saw it multiple times today. Like, they had quite a few holding calls called against them on the offensive line. But guess what? You have the team that has the highest conversion percentage of 3rd and long in the NFL, of 3rd and 7+. If you have to, take the hold, but don't let them hit Patrick Mahomes. You're going to lose at least 10 yards on the sack regardless. At least you get to replay the down if you hold them. You know what I mean? I honestly think that they played that knowing that if they got beat, they were just going to hold the guy to keep him from hitting Patrick Mahomes. And it's not, honestly, if you're going to give up a sack, it's not that bad of a plan. And they also kept Jerick McKinnon back to chip and help in pass blocking a lot more. I felt like today, to give that extra help, and it worked. I would say do that the rest of the season.
Yeah, if that's what you need to do it, and defenses will adjust, and then you'll readjust, and you'll go back and forth that way. Like, having this kind of performance against this defense and acknowledging their injuries, but still, like, even with all the injuries, their defense has still been spectacular this season. And to carve them up the way that they have, or the way that they did today, and put up 44 points against them, like, it's extremely impressive. Like, I cannot be more impressed with this Chiefs team after this performance. And again, it starts with the protection up front. When Patrick Mahomes has time and he does not have pressure in his face, immediately when they snap the football, good things are going to happen, as with any offense in the NFL. The difference being here is that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. So if you can really protect him, you're going to win a lot of football games. And they did that all day today for the most part. And we just need to see this consistently throughout the rest of the season, because now we have two performances against good football teams. I understand Tampa Bay lost again to the Carolina Panthers today. They have now lost back to back, and they look pretty bad. But for a few weeks there, they looked like one of the best defenses in football, and they've got some injuries of their own. But you've got two performances, at least on big stages, against big time opponents, and both of them happen to be NFC opponents. But when you can show up and play like this and look this dominant compared to some of the other performances you put on tape this season, like, there's not excuses to have letdown games anymore. Like, you have proven so far through 7 weeks of the season, you're 5-2. One of them is an inexplicable loss to the Indianapolis Colts, and the other is a loss to the best team in football, where, you know, you were in it, you had an opportunity, and you fought them to the very last down. But the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, right now are right behind the Buffalo Bills as the second best team in the NFL. And the Philadelphia Eagles are right there in the mix at number 3. They're on bye this week, but there's no reason to have these letdown games anymore, because we've seen what the peak is, and the peak is what we saw today. Like, they were absolutely fantastic today. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a 16-yard score to open things up, and, you know, everybody scored touchdowns today, basically, except for Travis Kelce and Jody Fortson. I had a Jody Fortson anytime touchdown. Would like to see that hit, but it's okay because everybody found the end zone today. Like, this is just one of those patented offensive performances from Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, where you're like, man, it doesn't matter who the personnel is. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. When these guys are playing like this, and when they are playing at their peak and they are executing at the highest level that they possibly can, there's no one in the NFL that I think is capable of beating this team. And this is why they are right there once again in the Super Bowl mix.
Oh, 100% they're right there, the Super Bowl mix. And I think you said something, you know, very intelligent and really pointed to hit the nail on the head back there when we were talking about when Patrick Mahomes has time to work. You know, he's unstoppable. If you think back to the Super Bowl when we beat the San Francisco 49ers, what did Patrick Mahomes come to the sideline and say before they ran WASP? He said, "You think we have time to run WASP?" Why? Because that defensive line had been causing them problems all game long. Like, Patrick Mahomes, we all know Patrick Mahomes was running for his life against the Bucs in the Super Bowl. He didn't have a lot of time against the 49ers when they played him in the Super Bowl. And the Chiefs had a much better game plan, because this defensive line is beat up right now, but talent-wise, they have more guys with more talent on the defensive line now than they had then. And so 100% hats off to the offensive line. And then as far as the offensive game plan goes for this team, I think you saw Patrick Mahomes, you know, he's mentioned it a few weeks ago when he said, you're going to see the ball spread around a lot more. It's not just going to be two guys. You're going to see me spread the ball around, and it's going to be a different guy each week that steps up. Well, today we had big plays from Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS, Clyde, and then Mecole had the Mecole coming out party, you know, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a bit. But it wasn't just, you know, Tyreek and Kelce, and it wasn't really Kelce at all today, because it seemed like, you know, Shanahan, after the first quarter, when Kelce had some really big plays, Shanahan decided that we were going to take away Kelce, and you beat me somewhere else. You beat me somewhere else. And Mahomes said, okay, I'll just go to the next guy. It's that old, like, Patriots mentality with Brady, you know, and Belichick, you know, and a lot of his Super Bowls, where it was a different guy every week that stood up.
Yeah, they were so impressive today. And Juju Smith-Schuster was fantastic. 7 receptions for 124 yards. MVS, 3 catches for 111 yards. He had a 57-yard reception that was a backbreaker for that 49ers defense. Travis Kelce just studding it up like he does each and every week. It doesn't matter what the defense throws at you. There's just no stopping Travis Kelce. Had 6 catches for 98 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but he almost had one. It got called back because of a penalty. Jerick McKinnon had a huge reception on 3rd and long. That was another backbreaker for the 49ers defense. And then, of course, Mecole Hardman. And I think I owe Mecole Hardman a little bit of an apology here. Mecole Hardman finds the end zone 3 times today, all 3 of them on jet sweeps, which seems unbelievable. But Andy Reid, again, was just dialing things up today. Like, Andy Reid was just in his bag, and there was nothing San Francisco could do to slow down this offense. We talked this week on Show and BK about Mecole Hardman, and I know a lot of us are eager to see Sky Moore more involved in the offense. I certainly could go without ever seeing Sky Moore on special teams again. I still think he can be a playmaker for you offensively if he can get more involved. But we talked this week on Show and BK about how Mecole Hardman right now is the only reliable guy that you have, the most consistent, big play, game-breaking wide receiver. And I know we saw MVS make some of those plays today, but we talked about MVS in the past. Like, I like MVS when he shows up. It's just that he's not always consistent. You can't always rely on him. He's not always going to be that game-breaking player. But Mecole Hardman, for all of his shortcomings as a Kansas City Chief, for all of the things that, you know, Chiefs fans want to criticize him for, and his up and down play and where he was drafted and, you know, him failing to live up to that potential, he is the most explosive playmaker that they have on offense. Like, I think that's pretty indisputable. And you just have to find a way to get him involved in the offense. And Andy Reid said today, all right, I got something for Mecole. I got some packages for Mecole today. And they utilized him in a perfect way. I'm fine with Mecole Hardman just stepping into that kind of Deebo Samuel role and getting these handoffs out of the backfield and these jet sweeps and stuff like that, because I think he's probably more reliable there than he is as a pass catcher at this point in his career. Like, he can still make some plays downfield and he can still be explosive. You just got to find a way to manufacture big plays for him. And Andy Reid did that today, and Mecole Hardman was fantastic.
Mecole Hardman was fantastic today. And, you know, I think Mecole Hardman is who Mecole Hardman is, and he is an extremely dangerous weapon if you play to his strengths. One of his strengths happens to be a jet sweep. He's still a guy that you have to scheme into the game. He's not a high volume guy, and he's still a guy that you have to, you know, intentionally put the ball in his hands to unlock his explosiveness. But that being said, when you do, he is an extremely dangerous weapon. And there's a lot of fans out there, myself included, and I do owe Mecole Hardman a little bit of an apology, that in years past, I did not trust him with the ball in his hand to make the correct decision or the intelligent choice. I felt like he put the ball on the ground too much. I felt like you just couldn't trust him in a big game scenario when it was on the line. I feel like Mecole Hardman has matured a little bit in that aspect. He's still not a pure wide receiver. He is that X factor weapon that you scheme in for 5 touches a game, and 3 of those 5 touches went for a touchdown today. And as long as you do something like that, he could be the difference maker between a win and a loss week in, week out. Because guess what? If he gets you a touchdown every single week off an explosive play, that may be the margin of error or the margin of victory that you need to turn the tide. So that being said, hats off to you, Sky Moore. I've talked a lot of trash on you. Today you showed out. You served the kingdom well. And so congratulations. And I will say this. I want to see Kyle Shanahan's press conference, because the fact that Sky Moore kept scoring on jet sweeps, I want to see if he goes full. Oh, sorry. I mean, not Mecole. Sorry. Not Sky. Mecole Hardman kept scoring on jet sweeps. I want to see if he goes full old school Dennis Green. Is like, they are who we thought they were. You know, it's like pounding his fist on the podium, you know, just outraged that they knew it was coming and they couldn't stop it.
And I want to remind you guys, please leave your comments. Use hashtag AP Rapid Reaction in the comment section. We'll try to get to him at the end of the show. And this one's from Steve Haig. He says, Serda, you were so negative talking to the 49ers podcaster. You changed your tune now. Referencing a podcast that I did with our good friend Rob Setz Guerrero, who works at one of our sister sites, Niners Nation, this week. And I don't think I was being negative, Steve. I was just talking about the way I saw this game playing out. I picked the Chiefs to win on arrowheadpride.com. I just said that I believe the 49ers were a very bad matchup for the Chiefs. Like, personnel-wise, what they did defensively, I don't think was a good matchup for the Chiefs. I don't think the 49ers offensive weapons were a good matchup for the Chiefs defense, and they proved me wrong. I'm very happy that they proved me wrong, because it's a lot more fun coming on here and talking to you guys when the Kansas City Chiefs win football games. So I don't think that I was overly negative. I think that I offered my analysis and I said the 49ers were a bad matchup for them. The Chiefs came out and they executed perfectly outside of the first 10 minutes of the football game, and they walk away with a huge win. So I don't think I was overly negative on the Kansas City Chiefs. I just think that on paper, this San Francisco team was a poor matchup for them. And again, the offense was just absolutely spectacular. Like, Kramer, you can just start throwing up touchdowns in the background because there was a lot of them today. Like, there's a lot of offensive plays to talk about from this game, but I do want to get into the defense a little bit because we've just been kind of drooling over the offensive performance, and deservedly so for the way that they played today. But there was some things defensively here where you kind of question what the 49ers thought process was, where early on in the game, Chiefs are down 10-0 early on in the football game, and the 49ers are absolutely gashing them on the ground. Like, at one point, they were averaging like 11 yards per carry against the defense. And San Francisco kind of shot themselves in the foot by saying, we want to keep up with the Chiefs, so we're going to throw the football for no reason instead of just continuing to run. Because I think if they would have continued to run, they could have controlled the clock more. They could have slowed things down for the Chiefs. And I think this would have wound up being a closer football game if they would have chosen to do that. But they didn't, and it worked out in the Chiefs' favor. I think some of that is when you're going against Andy Reid, you're going against Patrick Mahomes. We see this all the time. Teams that go for it on fourth downs and teams that say, no, we have to score touchdowns against this team, because they know how devastating the Chiefs offense can be and how devastating Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid can be. And so it affects your decision-making a little bit. And I think we saw today that it really affected Kyle Shanahan's decision-making. And Andy Reid was the better coach today, because Kyle Shanahan comes in this game thinking, Andy Reid's considered like the greatest play caller in NFL history. I want to be considered the greatest play caller in NFL history. So I'm going to do whatever I can to compete with that. And I'm going to show Andy Reid I can put up points with him. And Andy Reid won the battle today, won the battle running away, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, I mean, it reeked of a situation where, the student wanted to be the master and the master was like, no, I'm still the master. There's no reason why the 49ers should not have kept just feeding the ball on the ground game. It was working so well in the first half. I mean, if you think about when the tide ultimately really turned, Sky Moore makes a huge mistake trying to field that punt, puts it on the ground. They get the ball back in the Chiefs red zone, and then they try to throw the ball. Dude, just run the ball. If you run the ball there, you're going to score 7 points if you're Kyle Shanahan. You overthought the situation, and you put Jimmy G in a situation that he's not great at. Like, Jimmy G is a game manager, and you put Jimmy G in a situation where he had to carry the whole team and win it on his arm. And listen, the 49ers, to their credit, they did put up a lot of yards today. I mean, Jimmy G threw for 369, and they ran for 101 on the ground. Like, 470 yards of offense is nothing to balk at. But you had to do it, playing from behind and trying to win a sprint against the Chiefs. And that's just not how you beat the Chiefs. If you want to beat the Chiefs, you got to play them like Indianapolis did, where you control the ball, you try to slow the game down, and you make it ugly, right? And you try to frustrate Patrick Mahomes and make him take the short stuff. And I mean, Kyle Shanahan's just he's too smart for his own good sometime, and it causes him to do some really stupid things.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of that in this game with, Kyle Shanahan kind of shooting himself in the foot. And, this game could have turned out very differently. I think if San Francisco would have just stuck with the run game and kind of played into their style, which they're a dominant running team. And so I don't even look at the early yards that they were giving up against the run as something that is worrisome for this Kansas City Chiefs defense. I know that they've struggled against the run here as of late. They gave up some big runs to Devin Singletary. Josh Jacobs had a big game against them. I don't think this Chiefs defense is like a dominant run unit or anything like that. They've had some good performances. They've had some bad performances this season. I think that it's somewhere in the middle, which is fine, right? Like, you're you're looking at a totally average NFL run defense. You're fine with that when you have Patrick Mahomes, but they do still have some flaws. And we did see it at points today, despite the fact that they finally forced some turnovers. They headed into this game with one interception on the season, and they actually forced some turnovers today, which is huge for the defense because you need them to do that. And they were dominant up front, putting pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, which is something that they've been lacking at times this season. We've seen Spags have to dial up these blitzes because they're struggling to put pressure on the opposing offensive unit. And today they were absolutely mauling Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, they got a safety late in the game on Frank Clark. I probably owe Frank Clark an apology. That Niners podcast that the listener referenced earlier, I definitely called Frank Clark washed up on that podcast earlier this week. And Frank was good today. Frank showed up and played today. And I owe him an apology for that. Chris Jones was absolutely dominant today. Willie Gay had a half a sack and a blitz, a perfectly timed blitz from Spags. Like, that's what you need to see from this defense, right? You know where your playmakers are on that side of the ball. And Spags has done a good job this season dialing up the blitzes at a perfect moment. It's going to burn him sometimes because that's what happens when you blitz in the NFL going against these high level caliber quarterbacks. You're going to get burned occasionally, but that's what we have to live with when it comes to Steve Spagnuolo. What they did today, they put pressure without blitzing, and then Spags would dial up the blitzes. That's how this defense wins football games. And if they can do that on a consistent basis moving forward, man, I'm really excited for this secondary to get fully healthy because I still think we haven't seen the ceiling of this Chiefs defense.
No, we definitely haven't seen the ceiling of this Chiefs defense yet. I agree with you 100%. The blitz is most effective when your front four is already creating pressure on their own and you're just dialing it up as a change of pace, right? Frank Clark has had, a horrible last couple of seasons. Today he was locked in on his sack. If you watch, he had Jimmy G's cadence, down to the millisecond. He was just a little bit early, a couple plays before that and got the offsides call. And after that, he was like, nope, I'm locked in. I know exactly the very moment Jimmy G is going to snap this ball. And he was getting his jump on that safety against Trent Williams, who is arguably the best tackle in the NFL. He blew right by him at one of the most opportune moments, when the Chiefs really needed a big play there. And he got the ball back for his team. Like Frank Clark, that might be the best play you've made in the Chiefs uniform. Maybe your whole career. That might be your play right there, Frank Clark. And then the rest of the team, we hit Jimmy G 8 times. That's a lot of hits to put on a starting quarterback, and that gets inside of a quarterback's head. We had 2 interceptions on the game. Juan Thornhill's was a little bit of a garbage time interception, but Joshua Williams, good for him. In a big time situation when the Chiefs were backed up against their own end zone because of a mistake made on special teams. Joshua Williams, a guy who has been burned a lot this year and been criticized a lot, finally used his length to his advantage and came up with a really big play at a very large moment and a critical moment in the game.
And prior to that Joshua Williams interception, and Juan Thornhill did come away with that late game interception. So I believe the Chiefs are up to 3 picks on the year now. But prior to that, their only interception on the season was week 2, Thursday night, the game-winning 99-yard pick 6 from Jalen Watson. So Joshua Williams, who has been up and down and has taken a lot of lumps so far as a 4th-round rookie, kind of being thrust into a starting role before he's ready. And in a situation where if it were up to the Chiefs, he wouldn't be starting right now, but they just don't have an option with Trent McDuffie still on IR, and hopefully he'll be back after the bye, and Rashad Fenton's unhealthy right now. So they're doing the best with what they have in the secondary. So yeah, it's really good to see Joshua Williams come away with that interception. It's good to see Juan Thornhill get that pick at the end of the game, because after the bye, we need to see this team start forcing some turnovers. It's the last element, I think, of them defensively, aside from getting the secondary healthy. If they can do that, if this defensive line can continue to look like this, and they had matchups that worked well for them against San Francisco. Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey are both very good tackles. McGlinchey's pretty banged up. Williams is coming off the injury, but we know when those dudes are healthy, they are very strong bookends of your offensive line. Where the Chiefs exploited their best matchups was the interior of San Francisco's offensive line today. and they're bad there. That's where you have to exploit those matchups. And that's why we saw Chris Jones with a dominant performance. Like, I just think that the Kansas City Chiefs just really, really did a good job of game planning on both sides of the ball. They're very prepared for this game. And I think it says a lot ahead of a bye week. Coming off of a loss, I think it says a lot about where their mentality is right now as a team, because we've seen this team kind of let up during times like this ahead of a bye week, coming off of a loss, off of a letdown loss. Like, we've seen this Kansas City Chiefs team in years past kind of let down, and going 5-2 into a bye week with the adversity that they faced so far this season, all the injuries on that defense, and still kind of putting out a reasonable product every single week and a dominant defensive line performance this week, you got to feel really good about the Kansas City Chiefs going into their bye. Like, my expectations based on the preseason schedule that we saw over this first 7 weeks of the season, I was like, you're kind of okay, feeling all right if they're 3-4 based on how tough and difficult that schedule is, because, Mahomes will turn things around post bye and they'll go on a playoff run or whatever. But being 5-2 here, and one of your losses being to the arguable best team in the NFL and the Buffalo Bills, I don't think the Chiefs could be in a better spot right now, aside from that letdown game against the Colts, which seems like they have one of those every year. So you got to be happy with everything that you're seeing from the Chiefs right now. Like, they are a bona fide Super Bowl contender right now. And I think that the sky is the limit for them in the second half of the season after their bye week, as long as they get healthy and everything falls into place.
Yeah, I mean, the sky is the limit for them, and they are, the bona fide number 2 team in the NFL right now. And if they can find a way to match up against Buffalo and the defense in the playoffs, I think that they could definitely probably even retake that crown. I think in a matchup with the playoffs, with the season on the line, I think that Kansas City comes out and wins that game. I think that what you saw today was something that we haven't seen a lot in the Andy Reid era, or as Chiefs fans on the whole. It seems a lot of times that Chiefs will either play down to their competition, or they'll get up by, say, 10 points in the second half, and then they won't put the team away, right? They don't ever, they tend to struggle to extend that lead in the second half sometimes. And today you saw them go out there and just, really just put their foot, on the throat of the 49ers and just put them away, and really just take the game, out of question. The only time we saw them do that this year was against the Bucs. It's almost like this is a team that's kind of revenge based a little bit. Even though they beat the 49ers, there's been a lot of talk since the last time they played the 49ers, especially by 49ers fans who always try to tell Pat, win a real ring. Well, guess what? This was your guys' Super Bowl rematch, and we beat you guys by 3 touchdowns. So 49ers fans, shut your mouths, because you're not on our level. And I'll send that out to everybody right now. The Bills are a better team than us this year, but the 49ers, you guys aren't it. You're not in the NFC, and you're not making it to the Super Bowl to try to get another shot at us.
Hey, you really need to get that off your chest, huh?
Yeah.
So before we get to your guys' questions, and I do want to remind you, if you're listening to us on the podcast, as always, you can stick around after the show. We'll have all the post-game press conferences for you after the Chiefs' huge 44-23 win over the San Francisco 49ers. We do have to talk about the special teams before we get out of here. And Sky Moore comes up with another costly fumble. It's not that big. It's just because, Jimmy Garoppolo throws the INT to Joshua Williams on the following possession. But you just can't have liabilities on special teams. And we've talked a lot in this show, actually, about their season-long performance so far through 7 weeks. And, that Indianapolis Colts loss, for everything poor that they did offensively and defensively in that game, I still think they come away with a victory in that game if it's not for all of the special teams blunders. And Sky Moore, his second fumble on a return through 7 weeks is not great. And as much as I want to see Sky Moore get more involved offensively, I don't know if it's going to happen this season with all the veteran presence that they have on that side of the ball. But I do think we got to start making some adjustments here during the bye week if you're Dave Tobe, because there's an issue here with Sky Moore returning kicks, and you can't have guys out there that are going to be a liability on special teams, because as we saw in that game against the Colts, you just can't have guys that are going to cost you game-changing plays on special teams. Like, special teams, you want to see game-breaking plays like your Isaiah Pacheco returning the second half kickoff and putting the Chiefs in great position to score right out of the gate. That's fantastic. We just have not seen that from Sky Moore as a punt returner this season. Late in the game, after Chris Jones sacked Frank Clark sacked Jimmy Garoppolo for the safety, it's worth noting that Mecole Hardman was back for the free kick on that play. Now, Andy Reid said in his post-game press conference that Sky Moore wasn't hanging his head. They still have confidence in him as a returner. There's a lot of coach speak, but I have to imagine at this point we're going to see a move at punt returner coming out of the Chiefs bye week. And I still have sky high expectations for him as a player, but you just can't have him on punt returns. He didn't do it in college. There was no real reason for them to do that here, except for they want to get him involved because they think he can be a playmaker. They just don't have space for him on the offensive side of the ball. You just can't have a guy out there who looks like he's questioning himself every single time he's got a punt coming his way.
No, you can't. You got to make a move. He can't be your punt returner in the second half of the season. Otherwise, you're risking. You can't have him fumble a punt in the playoffs. Mecole Hardman. Part of the reason why I've gone all this time being wary of trusting him is he fumbled a punt in the Super Bowl. I didn't trust Mecole Hardman after he fumbled a punt in the Super Bowl. You'll lose people's trust if you can't do the most simple part of that job effectively, and he's really struggling with it right now. And I think, honestly, if Andy Reid was being honest with you, yes, his offense is very, very hard to grasp for a rookie wide receiver. But I think that some of these mental errors and special teams have bled over into the reason why you don't see him used more on offense. I think Sky Moore is going to be a great wide receiver, but we almost have to write this off as a redshirt season for him. I think at this point, maybe we'll see him more involved in the second half of the season on offense, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it. Honestly, I think that he needs to build some trust up with Andy Reid, and Andy Reid needs to see a little bit more out of him in order to really give him the ball in these situations. Now, that doesn't mean that Sky Moore was a bad pick or Sky Moore will be a bad player down the line. It just means that Sky Moore is a second-round rookie wide receiver in Andy Reid's offense, and it's going to take some time. Next year he may be the guy, and he may be awesome, and that's fine. Not every single player has to be immediately successful.
I do think that we'll see him turn a corner later on in the season offensively. Like, I think he's inevitably going to get some more design plays specifically for him, and he's going to get some more opportunities on the offense. And we'll get to the questions here in just a second, but we do have to mention Isaiah Pacheco was the starting running back today. And we've seen so far this season kind of the way that they're deploying these guys on offense. Like, Isaiah Pacheco is getting these opportunities in kind of big games, certain circumstance situations. And then, Ian Rappaport reports early this morning, it was at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, that he's going to be the starter. Well, it didn't really mean anything. Clyde still wound up being the more productive running back. And I don't think that starting the game as being the first running back on the field for the Chiefs means anything right now, because it is a full-blown 3 running back committee. And that's not going to change anytime soon. So if you had high expectations for Isaiah Pacheco in fantasy football and you scooped him up this morning, sorry to let you down. I don't think that's changing. I think this is a straight up 3 running back committee for the Chiefs moving forward. And, I think Pacheco's going to have some big games down the line. Clyde's going to have big games. Jerick McKinnon's going to have big games. Ideally, you just see all of them making plays when they get the opportunity to do so. I think the same's going to be said for Sky Moore when it's all said and done, where he's going to have his moments this season. Hopefully, it's just not going to be any more negative ones on special teams, because he does not belong out there returning kicks anymore. He's not comfortable. He didn't do it in college. We've seen enough of it, Dave. So please get him out of there. Let's figure that out over the bye week. But let's get to some of our listener questions, Kramer. Hashtag AP Rapid Reaction Show if you want to sneak some in here at the finish line. From Rick: something needs to happen with Wiley. He's allowed way too much pressure on Mahomes. Well, I mean, we headed into the season knowing Andrew Wiley was the biggest question mark on the offensive line. I think the bigger concern is Orlando Brown's struggling play, which he was actually pretty good today. So if you get healthy Orlando, and hopefully Wiley's not just a straight up liability, then hopefully this thing will continue to work throughout the season. Maybe Lucas Niang's an answer there, but I tend to believe that you're just going to have to roll with Wiley and hope for the best. And hopefully you get some more performances like you did on Sunday.
I wouldn't hate to see them try at least for one game, moving Thuney over to right tackle and moving Wiley over to left guard just to see how it looks, because Thuney's played a little bit of tackle before. He filled in admirably when Orlando Brown Jr. was out last season. Now, that doesn't mean that you want Thuney to be your week in, week out tackle. They do need to find something there because right now they have one offensive tackle and a bunch of guards on their team and then an all-world center. And so I don't believe that Andrew Wiley is a legit NFL tackle. I'm there with you. But I think that, try mixing it up a little bit and see if you get better results.
Yeah. And, maybe they'll have Lucas Niang back later on in the season going into the bye. I would have to, we'll get an update from Andy at some point, maybe on his status, probably not until after the bye week, but don't really know what his situation is right now. But I just don't know what answers they're going to be able to have there. It's, offensive line's not something you really see a lot of teams deal at the trade deadline. So I don't think there's an answer there if that's what you were hoping for. From KC90, having only MVS and Sky under contract next year, is it too soon to want to extend Juju on a 2 or 3 year deal? No, I think that sounds like a lot. I mean, you can extend Juju mid-season. Like, that's something the Chiefs can do. And, they're freeing up cap space, and that's not necessarily going to affect his cap hit this season. If I understanding everything correctly when it comes to the Chiefs cap space. But I don't know if I'm there yet. Are you there, Rocky? Like, I think Juju is fine. I think Juju is a fine wide receiver. He is a good possession wide receiver. And we've seen him make plays in back-to-back games now. And he can be that guy. I just think that he's a reliable chain-moving wide receiver who's really strong, catches everything. He's always going to be in the spot that he's supposed to be in. You never got to worry about him running the wrong route or something like that. Like, he is a solid NFL wide receiver. I don't know if I'm quite to let's give him a 3-year extension yet, though.
He is a chain moving wide receiver, but he's also a chain moving wide receiver that went 45 yards for a touchdown today and caught 7 receptions for 124 yards, averaging 17.7 yards per reception. I am a believer in Juju. I don't think that you extend Juju thinking he's your number one wide receiver, though. I don't think the Chiefs have a number one wide receiver. And I think even going into next year, if you have MVS, Juju, and Sky, all 3 under contract, you're feeling good, but you still need to add a true number one wide receiver, right? Sky's your slot guy. MVS is your 4th wide receiver, big play guy who can stretch the field. And Juju's your number 2 who can move chains, but you still need that true number 1 X wide receiver. So at the right price, yeah, I say you extend Juju. But if Juju's looking for number 1 wide receiver money, then I'm out. But at the right price, I love Juju on this team. I think him and Mahomes look great together.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Last question before we get out of here from Chris. Go get Cameron Jordan since Burns cannot be had, and let's shoot for another Super Bowl. I mean, that sounds great. I have no idea what Cam Jordan's cap hit is off the top of my head. I would have to imagine he's pretty expensive. I also don't think that the Saints are in tank mode and looking to offload picks, but they did trade their first overall pick this upcoming season to the Philadelphia Eagles to go up and get Chris Olave. So maybe they are interested in trying to acquire some draft capital. That'd be something I'd be really interested in. I still think Cam Jordan is a really talented player. I just, without having any idea how much his contract is, I would assume that he's probably pretty pricey for the Chiefs. Burns is at least looks attractive because he's going to be cheap in the immediate future with a long-term extension, probably in the off season.
Yeah. So with Cam Jordan, I'm not sure on the entire details of his contract. I'm looking at it right now. It looks like they restructured him this year, and he has a $12 million cap hit, but his base salary is only $1.1 million. So we'd have to see the details of that contract to know whether or not the Chiefs could even afford him. I am a fan of adding an edge rusher, before the trade deadline. I think that the Chiefs have 3 positions where they could use to add somebody before the trade deadline. I think another weapon on offense at wide receiver would be a good move. I think adding an offensive tackle, if there is somebody out there to be had, is a good move, or adding a free agent like Darrell Williams at tackle. I wouldn't mind that. And then I think that adding an edge rusher. I think you got to do something to try to put this team over the hump a little bit. Just to really, you have Mahomes in his prime. So do whatever you can every single year to put the very best team you have out there. And you have a little bit of cap space and you have a chance to add somebody and you got 12 picks next year. Go out there and get somebody, hopefully at edge rusher, but if not at tackle or wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm all about them adding an edge rusher at the trade deadline if it makes sense for them financially and it's not necessarily mortgaging draft picks in the future. They do have a lot of draft picks next season, so I think that Brett Veach is certainly willing to part with some of those draft picks if they can acquire the right player. I would have to think that Brian Burns would be the guy. Like if they're willing to give up first round picks, it's going to be for him. I wouldn't personally give up a first round pick for Cam Jordan at this point in his career. He's still a very good player, but I wouldn't be willing to part with the first round pick for a guy who's as old as he is at this point. And, Robert Quinn shouldn't be a guy who's going to command like a high draft pick compensation. So he'd be a guy that you could take a look at, but we'll see. The trade deadline's approaching. The Chiefs have extra time this upcoming week as they head into their bye to try to figure some things out. So maybe we'll get some breaking Chiefs news on the bye week. Hopefully it's a big time trade as they get ready to take a break, get healthy, hopefully, and come back fresh and ready for the second half of the season, sitting at 5-2 atop the AFC West after their huge win over the San Francisco 49ers. Please make sure you follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. You can follow Kramer as well at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. As always, please make sure if you're listening on the podcast page, you stick around after the show. We've got all of the post-game press conferences coming up for you. I do want to remind you guys, by the way, we're going to change things up a little bit next week on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. It is the Chiefs bye week, so gonna dial things back a little bit. For the most part, Monday, Tuesday, we've still got a lot of our regularly scheduled shows, but we're gonna change things up. We'll still have things coming out for you each and every day of the week. Just gonna dial it back just a little bit to give everybody here at AP a little breather on the Chiefs bye week too. Make sure we're well rested and ready to go as well for the second half of the NFL season. But again, Chiefs win 44-23. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you soon.